more on this, let's cross over to Washington, D.C. and bring in Devon Cone. She is a senior advocate for women and girls over at Refugees International. Devon, good to have you on the show. As tragic as this 26-year-old Afghan woman's story is, unfortunately, it's not the only one. In fact, there are probably dozens of stories like this, many that go unaccounted, and they have to endure very tough situations in these camps.
Yes, indeed. First, thanks for having me. And I agree. I mean, of course, indeed, this is a tragic situation, but this is only one of the most recent and most dramatic manifestations of these severe mental health and emotional problems that people have, because the toll that these conditions and the lack of certainty they have has on them really takes a huge toll. The others are just not making it to the news. So, like, for example, when I was last on the islands interviewing asylum seekers and refugees, even before the pandemic, there were reports of several young children even who were attempting suicide based on the difficult conditions and the ways in which those conditions affected their mental state. And so I think also it's important to take a step back, even just from Greece, and acknowledge that, asylum seekers around the world are living in difficult conditions that with a lot of uncertainty, and it contributes to these mental health problems that, as we've seen in this example, has been a really tragic example of that.
You talked about your own personal experience before the pandemic began. I mean, I'm assuming that the conditions at these camps have gotten, considerably worse since the beginning of this pandemic, with the implementation of these sort of draconian-style measures. Correct?
Yes, I mean, people are living in really overcrowded conditions. They have limited access to water and sanitation. They have limited access to healthcare in particular. So I think that certainly since the pandemic, these issues have become more exacerbated. And also, as we saw from this woman and her situation, there are delays in processing of asylum claims, in travel and relocation to other places, which really takes a toll on people that are stuck in lockdown environments. Also, there are issues of gender-based violence. That's a lot of the stuff I work on. And certainly for women in particular, women and girls in these camps, there's a huge risk of gender-based violence. And that has only increased since there's been a lockdown and COVID-19 related restrictions.
I want to talk about that. I mean, what do you think, if you could sort of enlighten us on what are some of the gender-specific problems of refugees and asylum seekers?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly many, unfortunately. I think, again, one of the biggest concerns we have is the risk of gender-based violence, both before the pandemic, but certainly since. I mean, women and girls are locked down with their abusers. There is limited access to resources and help and assistance, given the restrictions on movement and abilities for people to meet in person. And, this is one of the big examples, but one of the challenges also that we're seeing in Greece as well is that people are fleeing, women and girls and other refugees and asylum seekers are fleeing persecution and severe trauma in many cases. So while they're in a place trying to recover from their trauma, women and girls in particular are at increased risk often for more violence and more assault, and particularly in camps like Moria and the place where, and in Lesvos and on these islands, these Greek islands, the overcrowding and lack of bathroom facilities and locks and lighting really contributes to a risk for women and girls in particular for gender-based violence.
All right. Devon Cone, thank you very much for joining us from Washington. I do appreciate your analysis.